Hey guys, it's Jay, here with another review video. Before the review begins, I'd like to ask if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and share with others. Without further ado, on to the vid. The episode begins with Thanatos looking on at the first table. Eric then closes his hard drive and passes it to Junie. He tells her to take the hard drive and deliver it to Aldrich Ross directly, as within it lies all his research. He adds that he withheld publishing it due to the existence of a mole amongst them, and that Thanatos must not know the extent of their knowledge. He says on it are 743 possible ways for Code to win the war, but with Thanatos now in possession of the Merlin Stone, their odds were reduced to 120. He adds that Aldrich must read the files and that she cannot fail. As for them, with one man gone, they'll have to form a three-man point, their second strongest formation. They'll be able to slow him down while she escapes. Junie contests the idea and asks if he is sending off one of their strongest blades. She adds that they were hand-picked for their talent synergy, as the first table is a formidable foe meant to stand together. Eric then notices Thanatos begin to lift his hand, and before anything can happen, he forms a Maximilian wall. A wave of psychic energy then slams into the wall, and after it does, Grimoire calls Thanatos a monster and questions if he did this with just his mind, as Eric's wall barely held. Thanatos with a raised finger says, "It's not the talent, but the chi itself that resists me. Impressive. Applaud yourself. That in itself is a feat. I too shroud myself in protective chi. This is why I understand the weakness all barriers possess better than any. Pinpoint focus." And with his final words, Thanatos pierces through Eric's wall, putting a hole in him as well as taking Junie's arm off. Grimoire, in shock, looks towards them and calls out their names, while Holder calls on the name of his talent, as well as the elements of earth and water, which spew from his hammer and start to form mud around Thanatos. Jin says if Junie can stand to get Eric to the ship, and vanishes right after. Though Junie's in shock, she still reaches for Eric, saying she will get him out of there. Eric resists this by saying if she moves him, he'll die, and to save her strength for herself. He then says, "Junie, take the drive and do what I asked. He won't let the ship escape. I'll protect your retreat with what I have left. Please, do not resist my final wish. Thanatos must not consume all of our chi. You must live. In the war to come, Lord Hart must have at least one of us at his side. This is farewell, Junie Taylor." We then see the transport ship flying away with Eric's barrier covering it. Thanatos, looking up, says, "A wall of mud. The Hothbirch talent. I recall this one. A talent descendant of my brother, Okeanos. You possess immense elemental control, correct?" Though Holder says nothing, while different elements flow from his hammer. Something then scratches at Thanatos' armor, catching his attention. Grimoire then appears before him, attempting to strike with his swords known as the Nine Fangs, though he is blocked by Thanatos' double-bladed weapon. Thanatos then questions if Grimoire is too quick for even time to follow, and adds that he is not familiar with his talent, so it must be new. Holder then blasts a stream of water and electricity at Thanatos, but he forms a psychic barrier causing the elements to pass over and under him. He then flows lava from his hammer and goes to attack head on, saying at the same time, "Lord of Death, for many years we have prepared for your coming. This time, I promise you will stay dead." His attack amounts to nothing, and the barrier sends him skidding back. He then channels wind and electricity, which he forms into two tornadoes. Seeing this, Thanatos moves his hand and uses his power to move the very ground, attempting to crush Tandor. He then notes Tandor's talent greatly infuriates him, as he stands as a mockery to them, his original fathers. He then tells him to bow, and the weight of his punishment will be lighter. Meanwhile, Grimoire reappears above and behind Thanatos, attempting to attack him off guard, but Thanatos simply forms his barrier again while saying, "Back from the future, how did it look? You used your premonitions to avoid your comrade's abilities, walking amongst the destruction, choosing the perfect spot to place your feet. Great synergy." He then takes his weapon and enhances his attack with his psychic energy, which launches Grimoire away, while he also says, "I feel the weight of your blade before you even appeared. A man who walks on time. The creator has gotten quite creative, huh? If it weren't for my foreknowledge, you might be able to defeat me by yourself. But every talent of haste originated from my brother Katai Gita. And who do you suppose taught him the skills he used to develop his power? Weak mortal." Holder stands and moves the ground to the side while calling out to Grimoire, but Grimoire tries to warn him of what's beneath him, as Thanatos blitzes right in front of him and stabs him in the process, while saying, "You dare take your eyes off me, Hothbirch. Am I not enough?" Grimoire screams out at the sight of this, but Holder grabs onto Thanatos and tells him to enjoy the air while he still breathes it, and calls out the name of his talent. He uses fire and earth, which erupt the area in lava and engulf the two of them, though Thanatos walks away from this unscathed and says, I knew the elements course through your body and created combinations within, but I did not expect you to be able to house so much of it at once, burning yourself to a crisp just to kill me. The sacrificial mindset of the first table, prepare to die from the jump. I can somewhat respect it, but it does not bear much fruit, does it? 2 of you are dead already. Does Code think if they pile enough bodies at the door, I will be withheld from entering? I cannot be stopped, pillars of Code. Grimoire plants his blade in the ground, activating his talent in the process, and thanking it for showing him when his blade enters Thanatos' heart. He then begins to run around Thanatos, slashing at him with a barrage of strikes while Thanatos defends himself. He then says, "You are the last to stand, and I see why. Your technique takes directly from my brother Kataigita. Your blows cause this body pain, a sensation I have not felt in years, something I've come to enjoy. If I underestimate you, you may take my head. Speed has always been the star amongst my mother's sons, but do you know what has exalted itself over even my brother's haste? The mind. For as long as I can see you, I can break you." As we see Jin stopped in his tracks and with both of his arms ripped off and his left eye gone. However, this doesn't stop him as he pushes himself more and says that even so, the future never lies. He then grabs his sword with his mouth and thrusts it into Thanatos' heart. He tells Thanatos to remember this pain when Shay comes for him, as he will fall to the final pillar, but Thanatos simply destroys Jin's torso. Now on to the highlights. To start, we're going to take a massive look at the pillars. First, I want to acknowledge Eric's research and its potential connections. Eric tells Junie that there are 743 possible ways for Code to win the war, but with Thanatos now in possession of the Merlin Stone, their odds were reduced to 120. 120 is less than a quarter of the original possibilities, which shows how detrimental Thanatos having the stone is to the current conflict. Now, his actual research can consist of much more than the ways to win the war, and it's seemingly implied that's the case. However, we won't know what is on the hard drive definitively until we actually see it. It's more than likely possible that the location of Malhazar's tomb is also now within the files. However, if it isn't, the signal the stone produced and its prior location should be recorded on it, and it's possible for Junie to inform Aldrich of where the tomb might be at. This makes it possible for Shay, Andrea, or maybe Nico to visit the tomb in search of any other secrets it may have. I see this as likely happening due to Code's prior close relationship with the Hart clan, as Masato and Adam Ross were close friends, and just like them, Aldrich Ross and Sabito Hart were close friends as well. And considering that relationship, it would make sense for Aldrich to send someone to find and discover what was in his friend's ancestor's tomb, as it very well could aid Code in the long run. Spinning back to the possibilities in which Code could win, I think there's potential for one or more of the ways to connect back to something we're told in episode 113. Tevin narrating in the beginning says, "I heard of the path you were given." This to me sounds like Tevin is aware of something that Shay was told he had to do, and considering Eric wants Aldrich to read the files directly, it's possible that the path Shay was given was told to him by Aldrich and came from Eric's own research on how they could win. This would make sense, as while it does make sense for Shay to no longer be with the other cubs while he's Ronin, adding that there's a path only he can follow to achieve their end goal would make even more sense as to why he cannot be with them, outside of their different ways of doing things as implied by Brent in the Q&A. This would also add to why Shay has a new team, as he is okay with doing what he needs to do by himself, but those Kimyos more than likely agree with how he operates, and thus choose to aid him. My original point of Aldrich telling Shay of a path only he could follow may also be how Shay gets the Eye of Time. Remember, the Eye of Time is a power only a heart can wield, and Shay is quite literally the only heart alive who would survive more than one use of it, due to the talent's drawback in Shay's Thanatos body. Now, the Eye of Time almost has to be a talent object now, as that truly is the only proper way for Shay to acquire it, as if it's a normal talent, then it would have to reappear, and it can't reappear in Shay as he was already born with Thanatos, and a talent can't form in a developed human or Kimyo unless it's through talent transfer, so it has to be an object Shay can place in his eye socket. The only problem is we have no clue as to where it would be. The reveal of Malhazar's tomb could lead some to believe it's there, however it's seemingly implied no one knew of his tomb's location and that Thanatos is the only one who's been in it for years. Masato also getting it inside the tomb would be pretty much impossible since he would be fighting during the Heart Clan massacre, and we know this should be the case as Sabito was not the clan head at the time of his death. As Jamie says, he was heir to the throne, which should mean Masato was still alive. And this naturally makes sense as even Leo was alive in his 80s and Minamoto is alive at that same age now. I feel it makes the most sense for Code to have the eye in their possession, as it could be explained that while Nico was saving other members of the clan, she also attempted to save Masato, but he chose to transfer all of his talent's capabilities into his eye, potentially remembering what the past 7th head said to him about hoping this power lives to aid their cause. But before he did so, had Nico promised she would take the eye to the head chairman. This would lead to Aldrich knowing about the Eye of Time and being the one who gives it to Shay. If this is all true, then the opening parts of 113 heavily connect to the opening parts of this episode. Moving away from theories and speculation, we can look at the actual pillars in the episode. This episode actually makes it clear why they have the ranks they do, as well as what their roles are in a fight. Looking first at the ranks, Junie directly says Eric is sending off one of their strongest blades, which coincides with her rank of 28, making her the second strongest member of the 4, and should mean all of their ranks accurately represent how strong they are in comparison to each other. So this means Grimbor is definitively the strongest, while Eric is definitively the weakest. Their talents are what determine their strength, but also the type of role they play when in combat. Starting with Eric, as we see his talent first, he takes on a defensive role, and this is clear in his actions. He first protects all of them with his wall, and then again when he covers Junie's escape. This means he would be the one providing defensive aid during a fight, stopping incoming attacks the others may be too late to react to, as he is the first one to act when Thanatos raises his hand. Moving on to Holder, he seems to take on a more AoE all-rounder type of role. What I mean by that is his abilities tend to cover more area, and that allows him to fight in a way that's either up close or at a distance, as we see him shoot a ranged water and lightning projectile stream, then follow up with a lava swing of his hammer tool. He's also able to do something unique in the form of closing off the area. Lastly, for Jin, he is very precise and offensively focused. He is the fastest among the pillars, and he uses that to lay down a barrage of attacks or choose a specific spot to attack, carefully choosing where to appear so as to avoid his allies' attacks. We see the barrage of attacks at the end of the fight, and the specific spot when he attempts to hit Abel at a potential blind spot while he's distracted with Holder. Since we don't see Junie fight or know what her talent is like the others, we have to use these established roles for the others to guess what hers would be. Assuming all of them have a form of close quarters fighting capabilities, and seeing as how Jin is direct close offense, Hander is widespread aerial offense, and Eric is defense, Junie is more than likely a form of ranged offense. The weapon we actually see her have in the art of all the pillars may add to this, as it is a very long polearm. While she may not throw the weapon, based on its design, she may use it in a way that allows her to have maximum reach with it while still being consistent with her strikes. She also doesn't have it on her person, unlike how Jin and Holder have theirs, which could mean this weapon is created by her. Their very specific combat roles play into why they are pillars. As Junie tells us, they are handpicked for their talent synergy, and that they are meant to be a formidable foe meant to stand together. This means two things. One, they are meant to fight as a team, which means they are more than likely almost always together in the event they have to fight like in this episode. And two, it It explains why their ranks aren't as close together as we might have thought they would be. This also answers the question I posed on how pillars are chosen in my episode 114 review. Essentially, to be a pillar, your talent has to synergize or have a means of compatibility with other ranked members who are chosen to be pillars as well. And it seems those who are chosen for this role are picked amongst those who are ranked 21 through 50. Now we can move on to taking a look at each talent individually. And again, we'll start with Eric's talent, as it is the first one we see. Eric's talent is known as Maximilian and is a support type. The Maximilian chi is known among Code's ranks as a nearly impregnable force. Passed down through the Edward family, Sir Eric Edward, the 15th bearer of Maximilian, is able to project chi in small hexagonal shapes. By combining these shapes, he is able to build walls with astounding durability and flexibility. Now, we see this durability in action as the wall he makes is able to withstand Thanatos' initial attack, showing its actual capacity to defend, even though Jin says the wall barely held. Thanatos also makes a very interesting comment about the wall, as he says it's not the talent that resists him, but the chi itself. This should mean the talent's defensive capabilities don't come from simply being durable or having a high capacity to defend, but more so from the fact that the chi of the talent resists chi that interacts with it. This means that attacks that are closer to chi in operation will have a harder time getting through the wall. As for example, Eric should be able to defend against Rokash's corrosive slashes, as he simply fires out raw chi that is corrosive in nature. The downside of these walls is that while they can cover a wide area, as seen with Thanatos' attack, a focused shot at the wall will get through, as seen with Thanatos' laser-like projectile of his psychic energy. And some may have missed it, but the attack is shown piercing through the wall. This means an attack like Shay's Tomas or Rokash's Pharaoh Eye corrosive blasts are very likely to get through, as they are more focused applications of their abilities. And if for whatever reason you don't think Rokash's eyes would get through, keep in mind he can combine the eyes to increase the potency of the blast, and 2 or 3 shots of them aimed at the same area are guaranteed to get through. Eric also has the capacity to extend the walls he makes over a very good distance, as without moving from the spot he was at, he is able to completely cover Juni's exit while the ship is moving. This should also mean Eric has to keep his hands up to project his walls, as he does so against Thanatos. And lastly, I think the Maximilian walls have the capacity to be shaped in more unique ways than the one might expect. The wall he uses to cover Juni's escape seems to have more of a curve to it, and so very clearly does his initial wall. The talent description even says the combined shapes have astounding flexibility, so it's not too far-fetched to assume he could form a spherical barrier like that of Thanatos himself. Next, let's take a look at Holder's talent. His talent is known as Hothburge, and it is an elemental type. It is a 5-sided elemental talent. Through his body, Holder channels elemental combinations made up of water, earth, fire, wind, and electricity. He releases them as combinations of at least 2 elements at a time. He is also equipped with 3 pieces of code tech, each designed to focus his channeling: a hammer, a backpack, and a shoulder cannon. To start off, I want to say I was partially right regarding the elemental aspect of his talent, as with it, he made lava by combining fire and earth, and lava is something I guess his talent had the capacity to make in my trailer breakdown video. The elements are said to be within his body and make combinations within it. This seems like a passive effect of the talent, as initially Holder may not have been able to control what combinations are made within himself, which may be why he has a scar on his face and his head, as he could have accidentally burned himself trying to use his talent and manifested lava unintentionally. The combination nature of the talent is more than likely why Holder has code tech, as it seems to be implied that he can't use a single element at a time, and if that's the case, his talent would naturally be more dangerous, as he would always be releasing 2 elements at the same time. The code tech would help focus the use of his talent. As we see, he is able to channel his abilities directly through 2 of them. The shoulder cannon and the hammer are very clearly for combat use and allow him to switch between a ranged or close quarters fighting style. However, the backpack doesn't serve the same purpose, and I feel as though it was the original or foundational piece of technology that helps properly channel his elemental combinations. They would then build upon this by giving him the hammer and the shoulder cannon. In terms of the combinations themselves, he uses earth and water to make a mud wall, he shoots a stream of water and electricity, he flows fire and earth twice to make lava, and he also puts electricity inside 2 wind tornadoes. That's only 4 combinations, and considering the elements he actually controls, he can make plenty more. Just taking fire as the base for 2 potential examples, instead of using electricity and wind, he could sub it for fire and wind and make 2 fire tornadoes, which would naturally have more destructive capacity than what he actually uses. He could also use fire and water to make steam, which in theory theory could be used to obstruct Thanatos' vision in a manner similar to mist. Holder's use of the talent leads me to believe it was not mastered by him, and the actual peak of the talent would lead the combinations to resemble that of the Kekkei Genkai or Kekkei Tota from the Naruto series. For those who are unaware, the series of Naruto has plenty of elemental techniques that have various applications, and when using 2 or 3 of these elemental changes in chakra at once, it is possible to achieve a new element altogether. For example, Haku uses what is known as Ice Release, which is a combination of water and wind release. Using these 2 at the same time allows Haku to make ice-related attacks, and the combination of the 2 elements is called a Kekkei Genkai. And yes, I know that term has a bit more depth to it, but disregard that for the sake of this video. An older Sasuke in one of these novels does this as well. However, unlike Haku, who can subconsciously use the 2 elements at the same time to make his ice, Sasuke uses the 2 one after another to replicate a similar phenomenon. Another example would be Darui and his use of storm release, which is a combination of water and lightning release. Unlike how wind is used to cool the water making it ice, electricity is manipulated in a way to make it flow like that of water. Keeping these things in mind and applying them to the Hofburge talent, a user of it at its peak could use far more elemental combinations than Holder himself displays. For a quick example, a user may be able to combine electricity and fire to make plasma. Now there's a longer scientific process that I will not explain right now, but in essence, the electricity would act as an energy source that further heats and ionizes the already heated gases in the flames, causing it to transition into a plasma state. And lastly, let's take a look at Grimbor's talent. His talent is known as Havoc and is a haste and power type. Havoc is the haste talent that breaches time. Grimbor can propel himself several seconds into the future in short bursts. The blows delivered by his specially designed blades, 9 fangs, are especially devastating, as the weight of his attacks comes from both the future and the present. Now, his talent is very clearly the best among the pillars, as in a 1v1 against each of them, he would always have the advantage. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and actually dissect what the description says. It first says it is a haste talent that breaches time. This is probably the most interesting thing about it, as it seemingly implied the talent isn't supposed to exist at this current moment. Thanatos says he is unfamiliar with the talent, so it must be new, and if he doesn't recognize it, it couldn't have been around for any of his previous incarnations. This may lead you to think, well, of course a new talent wouldn't be recognized by him if it's only appearing now. But seeing as how it breached time, it more than likely came from the future, and its actual ability to propel the user to the future should reinforce this. That ability itself is what makes this talent so strong, and when actually achieved, it should mean the user is at or around light speed, as in theory you need to be able to move at least that fast to travel through time. Though if you disagree, I understand. Outside of that, Grimbor being able to move to and from the future gives him a great advantage in combat. Think about it like this: he's fast and can avoid attacks, but he can take that further and move ahead in time, making it so he is unaffected by the phenomenon of the present. And this gives him another advantage, as he is able to physically see what happens in the future, allowing him to go back to the present with knowledge on his opponent's and allies' next move. This ability, as pointed out by Thanatos, lets Jin choose the perfect spot to place his feet, allowing him to avoid his allies' destruction while picking a good place to attack. His actual attack themselves should be quite strong, as he not only has the added force his speed gives him, but his blades are designed in a way that allow him to attack with the weight of both the present and the future. This would essentially be the equivalent of hitting a person with both your present and future self at the same time, so his opponents would always be taking double the damage they normally would against anyone else. Now, time travel as a whole is very complex, and there are different ways to interpret how it would work, especially in relation to future events. But let's actually look at one of those to further dissect Jin and Havoc. Since Havoc allows Jin to move into the future, only that Jin would exist, and there would not be a second version of himself. This is because he is taking himself out of that moment in time and placing himself further ahead, not actually living and experiencing the gap in time from the point he left to the point he appeared ahead at. Hopefully I have a simple visual on the video to help explain what I mean. Jin would be at point A and move ahead to point B, but since he technically didn't exist in the gap between the points, there is no second version of himself for him to interact with. This eliminates the possibility of him propelling forward in time and tag teaming his opponent with his future self. But using this same timeline model, it should be guaranteed that if Grimbor landed a successful hit on his opponent in the future, when he goes back and and that time comes to pass, the resulting damage of the attack would appear. Thanatos should also reinforce this, as he says he feels the weight of Jin's blades before he reappears, meaning the attacks Jin is attempting in the future are showing up in some capacity before he actually returns to the present. An example of this should be when Thanatos notices the attack at his arm before Jin actually shows up in front of him, meaning that attack came from the future, and Jin's time for being there was up, and the attack showed up right before Jin returned. The two things I mentioned would only occur in a fixed timeline model where past or future, whatever happens was always going to, especially considering God in Ordeal is the same God in the Bible, and in the Bible, multiple times something is stated to happen in the future, and those events always occur as if they were always going to. Now let's take a look at Thanatos and the things revolving around him. First, this episode really helps highlight how much experience and knowledge Thanatos actually has. The first and probably best example is his knowledge on barriers. Because he uses one himself, he knows their weakness, and this is how he can easily pierce Eric's wall, even though prior he didn't. His actual knowledge on this may come from his fight with Leo, while he was wielded by Cain, as Leo in episode 14 uses a blue flame amped punch that began to crack the barrier, but prior to this, Leo's less amped and less pinpointed attacks had no effect. After Cain's resulting death, Thanatos may have surmised that pinpoint focus is the way to get through barriers. Thanatos is also able to accurately deduce how Grimbor's talent functions and how he fights, as well as block all of his strike attempts except the last. This is impressive because Grimbor is wielding a haste talent he's never seen before, yet due to the fact he taught his siblings how to use their abilities, he is able to counter Jin's speed. This is enhanced by how he's seemingly able to completely stop and damage Jin with just his mind while Jin is moving, and this shows how strong his telekinetic abilities are, as well as his actual capacity to perceive and keep track of those with higher speed movements. Now, as I mentioned, Thanatos says he taught Katsugita the skills he used to develop his power. I feel as though this information adds more to the way he describes them in episode 24, with him comparing their powers to the things they relate to, as well as him noting Ilios' mastery, Katsugita's wisdom, and Okeanos' grand use. I assume Thanatos helped them understand their powers to maybe a base or middle level of use, but they then figured out how to wield their power more effectively on their own, especially considering how it seems as though Thanatos at that time had been waging his war against them for quite a while. This concept mirrors what Bjorn did for Shay, as he doesn't directly teach him how to use Ilios, but teaches him things that lead to Shay having a better understanding on how to use his power as a whole. One thing I noticed, and this seems to be true in episode 24 as well, is that Thanatos doesn't seem to be able to use his psychic energy for two things at once. There's a good sequence that shows this as well. He lifts the ground to attack Holder, then protects himself from Jin's attack, and when he attacks again, the barrier is dropped and is used to enhance the swing of his weapon. His brothers actually use this against him, as Ilios attacks him, causing him to form the barrier, but Okeanos uses his water to breach through the ground and hold him in place, with Katsugita following this up by forcing his lightning to run through the ground so that it would naturally interact with the water, which is a conductor of electricity, leading to Thanatos being struck and stunned, and his barrier dropping as a result. This lets Ilios' flames reach him, blinding and burning him in the process, which grants them all the opening to land the final blow. This shows that even the strongest talent in existence has a weakness, but also shows why it takes talents of equal strength to beat it, as this weakness is not easily exploitable, due to Thanatos' capacity to react to others and his ability to use melee combat, leading potential plans to force his weakness being somewhat useless. Bran is actually a genius for having this iteration of Thanatos use a weapon, as before with Cain, it's almost implied close quarters combat was another one of his weaknesses, and if anyone on his level gets too close, they get forced through the barrier and he would have no response. This is without taking Sybaris into account though, but now he has a way to combat people who get too close, and can use his psychic energy to enhance those strikes, as seen against Grimbor. The last thing I want to look at is the Great Four's relation to other talent types. Thanatos tells Grimbor that every talent of haste originated from Katsugita, and before that he says the Hofbird's talent is descendant of Okeanos. These are very important statements as they begin to prove how the talent types branched out from the Great Four. To begin, Katsugita being the haste type progenitor naturally makes sense, but it's something I've always felt was the case based on two things. First is his actual movement in episode 24. In the panel on screen, I always felt as though this was a higher speed movement like that of a haste type, and in the same episode, after Thanatos blasts them all away, Katsugita is the only one seen moving quick enough to make it close to attacking Thanatos again before he is stopped by Sybaris. The second thing was Azam's lightning lightning in season 1. Since Azam always had a trail of green lightning that follows him when he runs, I naturally connected to that of Cat Aigida's movements in episode 24, which led me to think haste types originate from Cat Aigida. The power type might also come from Cat Aigida as well, as it's somewhat theorized that one of the types that make up his talent is power, which somewhat comes from the instability of Kevin, and we can connect that to Michelgar, another power-related talent that has a lightning effect to it. The Havoc talent also has a secondary type of power, and I feel this is not just due to Grimbor's capacity to cause more damage with his present and future weight, but also because he looks the closest to Cat Aigida than even Azam does. And this is because, as Thanatos says, his technique takes directly from Cat Aigida, and this shows how the Havoc talent is closer to the Cat Aigida talent than any other haste type, and how it may take one or both of its types. This also shows how talents that are directly from the Great Four are inherently stronger than those that aren't. Now, Okeanos being the reason elemental talent types exist makes more sense than Ilios or Cat Aigida being the reason, as he is technically the only one that controls elements that come from the periodic table, with that of course being hydrogen and oxygen that lead to water. Fire is not an element of the periodic table, but is instead a chemical reaction that can come from combustion of elements on the periodic table. For example, sodium can make yellow fire and copper can make green fire. Electricity is also not an element on the periodic table, but is instead the flow of electrons, and electrons are fundamentally charged subatomic particles that orbit the nucleus of an atom. And since atoms make up everything in the universe, electrons by proxy wouldn't directly relate to any specific element. Circulating back, this means that elements like Hothverge, Hisame, and Hexcarbon relate more so to Okeanos because their fundamental control over certain elements from the periodic table. Now of course, not all elemental talents have to operate in their fashion. I'm simply trying to point out how it makes more sense for elemental talents to come from Okeanos as opposed to his brothers, due to how similarly his talent functions on a base with other strong elemental types we know of, which could add to the concept of if a talent works similarly to the Great Four in concept, it will be stronger by proxy, as opposed to others that don't. Now, Ilios is more than likely the progenitor of all heat-based talents, but also potentially state-based talents. That may surprise you, but let me explain the heat part first. Ilios is an elemental and state type talent that produces fire and explosions from certain attacks, as seen with all of Shay's uses of Tomas. Jose himself believes Ilios is the reason his talent of rebirth exists, and expresses that in episode 120. This is more than likely true considering the star concept both talents share, with Ilios being the sun and rebirth being the collapse, explosion, and expansion of a dying star. The explosions and heat is something they truly share, and as said before, Shay's Tomas is his one attack that will explode without fail, while Jose can change the property of his stars leading to their combustion as well. Jose being shown he can attack with his left leg and right arm, and the attacks from them will result in more focused explosions, is somewhat similar to how an earlier version of Shay would simply spew flames directly from his arms. With all these similarities, it is also possible Cass's talent of incendiary art would come from Ilios' existence as well, as he can just as easily make explosions. Moving on to the state aspect, Ilios is the only talent confirmed from the Great Four that has the state typing. I also believe it'd naturally be more interesting if he was the only one of his siblings with the state typing, as it would further show the differences between them and their talents. Now, to properly explain this, I have to explain my new understanding of what a state talent actually is. The state type has been compared to shift because of their similarities, mostly due to Rokash. However, a big difference is shift talents are animal specific, while state talents are a bit more nuanced in concept. State talents are known to amp a Kimyo's base capabilities, as well as add new ones. However, state talents similar to shifts also have the capacity to turn their bearers into something, but that thing will be very talent specific and won't directly be animal related, but more so related to a being. To better understand this, we have to look at Ilios and Anu Ankh, as ferromagnetic state and hunter state really only exemplify the base of what the state talent does. Now, in my episode 123 review, I explained how the state typing is very important to the Anu Ankh talent, as everything it can do truly derives from it. However, I also mentioned how his state literally turns him into a golden pharaoh, which the talent is said to protect. And this is what I mean when I say a state talent can turn you into a being related to it. This concept is taken even further when we look at the Ilios talent. When Leo and Shay use Ilios state, their hair is turned to that of fire, exactly what Ilios' hair is. And when we see Shay and Leo use the pinnacle of their Ilios states, they are granted armor that resembles that of Ilios himself, showing further that Ilios state powers them up and makes them resemble that of Ilios himself. So again, if Ilios is the only of his brothers that is a state type, he would be the reason that type exists as a whole. And lastly, Thanatos is very clearly the originator of the psychic type, as even if we have not seen his official type, everything we've seen his talent do can only align with what that type is said to be capable of. This is not anything new, so I'd like to propose a new thought. What if, due to Thanatos and Okeanos having animal companions that are bound to their talent, they are the reason other animal-related talents exist? We don't have any evidence to prove this, but as of now, it's the only thing that makes sense. This would explain the existence of Tevin's talent Hide Forge, with his animal hides of rhino and lion. This could also explain the shift talent of Kong, as while it is an older ancient talent, its very existence could come from the fact two other animals were made as extensions of two Grade 4 talents. To end things off, I want to say I enjoyed this episode far more than I did the last one, as the action feels better in this episode, and the reveal of the Pillar's talents was very nice to see. However, I do have problems with this episode and what happens in it. The first is the fact the Pillars died too soon. They were introduced this season and only have 4 episodes they appear in. That doesn't give us enough time to get really attached to them like we have to some of the other characters. Now, that would be fine if the fight itself wasn't confined to just this episode, but it is, which leads to issue number 2, which is that the fight was too short. The seriousness of this fight should have caused it to lead into another half episode at the bare minimum, in my opinion, as 2 other fights this season were given a chance to expand past 1 episode. This leads into problem 3. Regardless of how long the fight lasted in terms of episode length, it should have been grander and led to a better showcase for each pillar. Eric dies at the start but still protects the team initially and helps Junie escape, so there isn't really much he could have done after that. Tandor and Grimbor, however, should have done more. Tandor puts 0 damage on Thanatos, which feels a little crazy considering the natural scale his talent is shown to have. Even if he didn't do a crazy amount of damage, his sacrifice should have left Thanatos with some form of burn marks and scorching on the body. I'm not saying it has to be a lot, just some. Grimbor, on the other hand, should have done more definitive damage to Thanatos. He outright says Grimbor can defeat him if it wasn't for his foreknowledge. He also says his hits cause Abel's body pain, and if he underestimates him, Jin could take his head, and his final hit proves he has the capacity to damage him. It would have been a little better if Jin's first off-guard attack did any form of damage, or maybe chipped his blade, or if any of the slashes from his barrage left cuts along his armor or body before leading to the final hit. It feels like this fight wasn't as important as it should have been, especially considering Thanatos says he's been wanting to meet them, and they were given a mission to find him. Junie did escape, so I'm hoping she's able to recover so that we can see more of her, as she was my second favorite pillar, and if she dies too, it'll prove the pillars as a concept were somewhat useless, since they died in their first on-screen battle. And just to be clear, I'm not upset that the group died, as death was to be expected in this season. I'm more disappointed that their first and only display didn't live up to the expectations I had for them. And while the team does get wiped by Thanatos, Brent still tries to imply how impressive and strong they are through Thanatos' speech, as he says Eric blocking his attack was a feat and believes Jin could kill him, which implies Jin is the closest to his current level. But this kind of speech doesn't mean as much without better showcasing to back it up. In turn, this fight does nothing but make Thanatos look good, which isn't a problem in the slightest, as I'm sure that's what a lot of people wanted, and even I myself am satisfied with this initial showcasing of his strength and skills. But it didn't need to be at the expense of other supposedly strong characters. And lastly, for the comment of the week, I would like to put a spotlight on Rigo Taku, who notes how the pillars have been on the front lines for years, and if they were some of the best Code had to offer, then the war against Thanatos will be brutal. He also said he made them look like fodder, and that all 3 talents were strong. I agree with everything this comment says, and with the sentiment that this episode shows how strong and experienced Thanatos actually is. The brutal comment also adds to how Brent said way back in the Otaku Fix interview that this season would have a lot of deaths, and this episode puts that on full display. But anyway, that's the video, guys. Let me know what your favorite part of the chapter was in the comments below, as well as how you feel about the things I mentioned in the highlight section. Don't forget to read the actual episode for yourself, and be sure to like it as well, and I will see y'all in the next one.